Tonight we're going to be discussing X Factor 87. I want to start with you, Chris. Have you read any run of X Factor, Peter David's X Factor, before?
Not really. I remember when I was a teenager, my cousin had a subscription to X Factor briefly for some reason, and
okay.
So I remember kind of thumbing through some of his, but no, I don't really have much of experience with X Factor, especially this run.
For myself, I remember grabbing some of the issues from like probably in the early 20s, around issue 23, 27, 28, somewhere around there. I was not picking up the Peter David era at all. This dropped December of 1992, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Evan, you and your history of X Factor.
One of the first X-Men comics I got, and one of my favorite comics of all time, is X Factor number 32.
That's right. You wrote about this, correct? Didn't you?
When X Factor was the original 5 X-Men, although Beast and Angel were out of commission, it was just Cyclops, Marvel Girl, and Iceman, and the Exterminator kids taking on a group of aliens pretending to be the Avengers. That's one of my favorite things I've ever read. I bought some X Factor here and there. I didn't have a dedicated comic shop, so I was at the mercy of Walden Books. I did not understand how comic book release schedules worked. I was just like, let's see what's out. But this issue I actually bought probably off the rack at Walden Books or somewhere like that, because it followed when I jumped headlong into the X books with Executioner's Song, which will not put my kids through college. Really thought that was going to pan out.
If you hadn't opened up the bags and to get the cards out, maybe it would have.
I have seen both opened and unopened bagged editions of these in $1 or less bins on multiple occasions. Fortunately, the story was fun, and I was thrilled to see Peter David was writing X Factor with a bunch of offbeat characters. I think it was issue 71. X Factor became a government-sponsored mutant superhero team with Havoc leading the way. I didn't know much about Multiple Man and Strong Guy, but they quickly became two of my favorite mutants. Since Peter David was writing it, I followed along with it after Executioner's Song. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure I bought this issue right about the time it came out. I was like, oh, this is great. I remember this guy from when Peter David he was still writing the Hulk, but I was no longer following Hulk at that point. I forget when he actually left. I want to say this run lasted about 2 years. X Factor, with some iteration of this roster, went on a lot longer. But years later, he brought X Factor back as a detective agency led by Multiple Man and Wolfsbane and Strong Guy. And at one point, I think Polaris was in there a little bit, but Wolfsbane and Strong Guy especially were in that. And that went on for, I forget exactly how long, because right after the 50th issue, they renumbered it so they could do the 200th issue. But that lasted a lot longer than this original run. And the other cool thing I have to share is that a couple months before that new X Factor number 1 was released, I went to Mid-Ohio-Con where Peter David was a guest, and he performed the entire script for the first issue at a panel. Awesome.
Well, penciling this issue is one name I definitely recognize from the 90s, and that is Joe Quesada. Help me out here. Either you guys can pipe up. What does does he end up becoming like president of Marvel, or what role does he become?
Editor-in-chief, and then later chief creative officer.
Okay. All right. I really knew him from some standout stuff in the 90s. Visually, some of his stuff was very stunning. So I'll just run down real quick, taking a look at Mike's Amazing World of Comics. His first credited work on Mike's Amazing World was from early 1991 with a series with DC called Spelljammer. You guys ever hear of that?
I don't think so.
Spelljammer? Okay. All right.
Sounds
Spelljammer was a campaign set in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons universe. When you look at these comics, this number 8 is when he started with Spelljammer. It'll say DC at the top, and right below it says TSR. They were writing comics related to Dungeons and Dragons. He does a few more issues of that for DC, and then he goes into the Ray and does 5 issues of the Ray. I don't know if you guys have ever read that. I haven't, but I can see the covers.
I think Christopher Priest wrote them.
In August of 1992, he then draws Batman, Sword of Azrael. That goes on for 4 issues, and then he promptly jumps to Marvel for this issue here and works on X Factor to issue 92. Now, can you guess what his next 3 issues to finish out 1993 were? He leaves Marvel at this point. Try and take a guess. This is 1993, and he's finishing out 1993, getting into 1994. What do you think
It was either Ninjak or Ash, which was his creator book.
All right. You got one right. So that's one.
Right.
Ninjak number 1.
Oh, so it was different. It wasn't a run. It was 3 different actual issues.
Yes. It was 3 different issues that he started. Ninjak number 1 was 1.
Okay.
Then there's 2 more. You got any thoughts, Evan?
I just know that X Factor 92 was the Fatal Attractions issue with the Havoc hologram on the cover.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I don't know. I know he came back to Marvel, but I don't know.
Okay.
I do not know.
Right.
Was it another Valiant comic?
Yes. All 3 of these are Valiant related.
Oh.
Two of them definitely are, and then one of them is related in some way.
Is one of them a Deathmate?
Yes. Deathmate Epilogue number 1 was the other one, and then the last one is a Valiant title.
Solar Man of the Atom.
No, we were not covering that book.
That would have been a great tie-in.
I was going to say Exo Man of War Iron Man. Actually, now I think that came out later in the 90s, like in 97 or 8 or something.
So, yeah, Exo Man of War number 0, Ninjak number 1, and Deathmate Epilogue rounds out his 1993. Then he gets into 94, which I'm pretty sure Ash happens at that point. Head to the Source Material Comics Podcast YouTube page to listen to the full podcast, and feel free to like and subscribe.